Hello and welcome to Video Game Hangover. I'm Randy Dickinson and I'm in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania.
Hello, I'm DJ Ross. I am in Mountain View, California.
Each week here on VGH, we talk about the games that have been keeping us up at night. Games like Stranger of Paradise, Final Fantasy Origins, and Welcome to Elk. Which,
welcome.
Oddly enough, is also subtitled Final Fantasy Origins.
Amazing. Oh, wow. How many origins does this thing have?
All the origins.
Mm.
That's not true, with apologies to developers of Welcome to Elk.
Oh, okay. Well, it's my game. That's not true either. It's not actually. Who knows what it's called?
Welcome to Elk, no subtitle necessary.
Oh, no, that's just wrong. I'm proud when the developer can just, show a little restraint and not slap a subtitle on the end there. Very rarely I feel like it adds something.
I think our opinion on subtitled video games, I think, is well established.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
You know the rules, but I think these, like in this game's case, it makes sense. Like, Welcome to Elk, it's fine. Stranger in Paradise, who knows? I'm surprised there's not a third subtitle hanging off the end of that one.
Sure.
To be honest.
Final Fantasy's Origins Revengeance.
Yep.
Is a dish best served cold.
There you go.
Yep. So, hi. How are you, DJ?
Hi. I'm doing great. How are you?
Happy St. Patrick's Day.
Happy St. Oh, man. Is it that time again?
It is. So in the spirit of last week, we talked about Mario Day. This week, I would like you to talk to me about your favorite Irish video games of all time.
Oh, no. I was going to say, St. Patrick's Day is just another holiday invented by Nintendo to sell more copies of their St. Patrick's franchise.
Of Mario, exactly. Yes, yeah.
I don't know. Have I played an Irish video game? What is that?
I don't know.
I'm
not sure.
I've played a lot of games with a score by Mr. Yasunori Mitsuda, who loves to he thinks he's from Ireland, the way his soundtracks sound.
Lots of bagpipes, lots of jigs.
Lots of, a lot of bagpipes. What is a jig, now that you mention it? Is that just like a dance?
Diddle-a-diddle-a-diddle-a-diddle-a-diddle, that kind of thing.
I don't know if it gets quite to that level, but
I think it's more of a dance than a style of music, but what I was just doing is this type of music you would listen to while doing a jig.
Got it.
Yeah.
If you're not familiar with Mr. Yasunori Mitsuda, he's probably most known for the soundtrack to Chrono Trigger, which he composed when he was like 20. He was very young. It was amazing. And everybody loved it. And then he went on...
I hate him already.
He went on and he did the soundtrack for Xenogears, which started to add a little more of that sort of Irish flavor into it. And I was like, oh, this is cool. Yeah. And then just every game after that was like completely just full on Irish. Like, whoa, okay, so this is... I guess he has found his niche, and his thing.
Yeah, exactly. Jeez. I've never been to Ireland. I have to assume that everything I know about Ireland comes from like pop culture probably, or Epcot Center.
Great.
So I proceed with caution here, knowing that most of what I sort of know or associate with Irish culture is probably a stereotype. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I don't have anything concrete to sort of add to this. I just Googled Irish video game developers, and there's not a lot.
There's none.
No, I didn't say none. Not a lot.
Sorry, let me correct that.
Yeah, there's Havoc. Anybody who sat through the opening scroll of a video game, like all of those logos that pop up, Havoc is one of the ones that pops up.
Oh, Havoc, like the middleware or whatever it is?
The engine, yeah, exactly.
Oh. Well, that's cool. I mean, that's in a lot of video games.
Yeah, absolutely. And Demonware is one of those middleware companies, too. They pop up a lot. And Romero Games, John Romero, the guy who made Doom. Apparently his current indie game studio is based out of Galway.
Okay. I was like, he's not Irish, is he? I don't know.
I don't know if he is, but he lives there, or at the very least, his company is based out of there.
Okay, well, that's cool.
Yeah.
I was going to say, like, oh, wow, surprise, Doom, the original Irish video game. Who knows?
Yeah, right. Oh, Doom.
Oh, Doom. Terrible.
So, yeah, I don't that's all I got. That is the only thing the internet has provided me.
Yeah, I'm not really, nothing springs to mind. Just too bad.
Yeah. So it's just, it is unfortunate that that's one of those things. Like every now and then I play a video game that takes place in a place that you don't go very often in video games, and I'm like, this is cool. More video games should go here.
Yeah.
I can't think of a single one that goes to Ireland.
I feel like there must have been a driving game where you went there at some point.
You drive through Ireland.
Drive through there. Yeah, seems like a nice place to drive through.
Yeah.
Don't send me angry
and
emails, please.
Shamrocks and green things, shamrock shakes everywhere.
Okay, well now we're getting into the stereotypes again. Yeah, the official milkshake of Ireland, the shamrock.
Right.
Shake.
I quit while I'm ahead, with apologies to our listeners in Ireland. Set me straight. If there's video games that we should know about, video game developers that should be on our radar from Ireland, hit me up, randy@VGHangover.com, and fill me in, because I am clueless at this point.
All right. We also just like to apologize for this entire segment.
Sure. Will you be celebrating or observing St. Patrick's Day in any way, shape, or form?
Oh, I don't know. I'm probably not going down to the pub like I do every year, just because, things.
Sure.
I don't know. How do you typically celebrate St. Patrick's Day?
I think there's a food component. There's definitely a beer component. There's a parade component.
Oh, I forgot about the parade. No, Harrisburg
has a big St. Patrick's Day parade, but I don't know, that just sounds awful.
I will change my Final Fantasy 14 character's outfit to be green for that day. How about that? Is that inoffensive?
I will be head to toe green on St. Patrick's Day in Animal Crossing, so
okay.
That's fair. I think that's the right way to do it, DJ.
Okay, yeah, something that's not just too overtly offensive.
Sure. Yeah. And who's watching, really, at that point, so.
Yeah.
What else? What else you got going on? How's life? How's things?
Oh, it's great. Everything's great. I don't know. I had pretty low-key weekend, so
good.
None of the usual adventures.
Low-key is good. Low-key is fine.
Played some Mario Party unexpectedly. It's been a while since I played Mario Party. Yeah.
No one expects Mario Party.
You don't really. Like, at this point, Mario Party, I mean, it's been this way for quite a while now. I shouldn't say just at this point. But I feel like Mario Party is just a thing that exists. It is like, as much like the way you were describing Final Fantasy a couple weeks ago, it is just always available in some form.
It's this ubiquitous thing in the universe, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there was definitely a time, like earlier in the lifespan of the Mario Party series, I would look at them and go, oh, there's a new Mario Party coming out. How is it different from the one that I already have? And I would just like look at it and go, oh, it's not really different at all. Why are they even making more of these things? But it's just, I feel like it doesn't need to be this bastion of innovation every single time they put one of these out. They're just putting out a new Mario Party like they would put out a new collection of Jackbox games or whatever. Jackbox? One of those two? So, there's just...
I would submit there's probably a fair bit more innovation in Jackbox games than in Mario Party.
Well, have you played the last few Mario Party games?
I have not, for that reason specifically, is that like I sort of feel like I get it. I know what you're doing, Mario Party. I don't, yeah.
I mean, every time I sit down to play a new Jackbox game, it's like, oh, wait, are we drawing a picture, or are we just coming up with a list of words? Weird. When was the last time we did that in one of these games? So, I don't know. Maybe it just depends how much time you spend with each of these things.
All right, I get you. I see your point, DJ Ross.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I mean, my point is that it doesn't need to be just mind-blowingly fresh and innovative every time. We played
Sure.
it for, a couple hours over the weekend, and it was a lot of fun.
Oh, good. Well, I mean, I like those Jackbox games sort of kept me in touch with my circle of friends when we could not safely be in the same room with each other through much of the last 2 years. So
yeah,
I'm grateful for the service they provide, even if the service they provide is not the most innovative thing in the universe.
Yeah, I mean, it's like Mario Kart at this point, almost. I can't even tell you what the difference between the last 3 or 4 Mario Kart games was, but I'm glad that, as long as there's a Nintendo console out there, is some form of Mario Kart that you can play on it.
Sure. Yeah. It just so happens that the current one is 8 years old and they're still putting out DLC for it. So
yeah, that's great. I mean, when Switch 2 comes out or whatever's next for Nintendo, just put the same Mario Kart on it. I won't even notice. I'll probably just buy it again and be like, it's still good.
That's fair. So what led you to Mario Party?
Oh, I was just at a friend's house, and we were looking for a game that everybody could play as a couple young kids, and it's like enough, like they can handle it. I think one of the key things that appeals about Mario Party is that you don't need to be like a pro gamer to enjoy it, because you're just playing a silly board game, really. And a lot of it is left up to chance. Like, as anybody who has played a Mario Party game knows, the ultimate winner of any Mario Party game, like any one Mario Party round, has very little correlation with who is the best at playing the mini games or who is like the best strategic mind at how they navigate the board. It usually comes down to how capricious is Bowser feeling at the end of the game when he swaps everybody's stars around or whatever happens. But just a good time, good way to spend a couple of hours.
Cool. I've not played the current incarnations. I admit that I can't keep up. I see every now and then, Mario Day, they had the Mario Day sale, and it was like, this Mario Party game is on sale. And I'm like, is that the new one? Is that one of the old ones? Is that a good one? Is that not one of the good ones? I'm not sure where Mario Party stands at this point.
I'm sure there's some huge Mario Party heads who would tell you, like, oh, this is the bad one. Mario Party 3, the worst Mario Party, or whatever. Mario Party 3 fans, don't email me.
So like Final Fantasy in that way, where the people, the stands, have like just hardcore sort of opinions on all of the little iterations of these things.
No, Randy, opinions on Final Fantasy matter. Let's get that thing straight.
Okay, I apologize. Clearly, I've overstepped.
I
don't know what I was thinking.
Anyway.
Yep.
So, like, Mario Party continues to be good, continues to just exist as a thing.
Nice. Speaking of things that exist, would you like to segue into some of the games we've been playing lately?
Yeah, we should do that.
Yeah.
What have you been playing lately? What have I been playing?
I've been playing Welcome to Elk.
Oh, this is that Final Fantasy spin-off game.
It is not. No. Let me just clarify that. This is a fun little indie game. Fun is a weird word. This is an unusual little indie game that I played. I read a review of this or a preview of this before it came out, kind of comparing it to Night in the Woods, which is a game that I like quite a lot. Kind of an unusual character-driven, has a bit of a fantasy spin, but is very much based in kind of real-world characterizations and real-world, situations. Really had a lot of appreciation for that game. So I'm like, well, if it even sort of comes in the neighborhood of Night in the Woods, maybe Welcome to Elk will be kind of a fun diversion. And I've read also that it was a fairly brief experience, that you could kind of get through it in a sitting. And I like games like that. I like I don't get to finish a lot of video games, unfortunately. So the fact that I can start, middle, and end a game in a single setting is intriguing, as long as that game is good, obviously. So Welcome to Elk is this kind of interesting experiment in storytelling, I think. It is if you got a bunch of friends around a table and ask them, hey, tell me a story about something crazy or interesting or scary that happened in your life, and everybody sort of like told that story, had a bit of a like, let me tell you about the time that and these are not necessarily things from the video game, but just, crazy things like I got hit by a car, or I flunked out of college, or et cetera, like like wild stories that happen in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And then
wild true
somebody took all of, sure, yeah. And then somebody took all of those stories and wove them together in a video game.
Okay.
So
this is not the gathering of people around the table is not what happens in the game. That you're just saying that is sort of the setup for this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So the hook here is that you play a young woodworking artisan who is from Denmark, who goes to the little island of Elk, off the coast of Copenhagen. Is that in Denmark?
Ireland?
Am I getting that part right? I believe that's right. Maryland.
Oh, Maryland.
and she is going to sort of apprentice to work with a woodworker or woodcarver there to kind of hone her craft. But upon arrival there, it finds this very small, very close-knit community of just a few people, just a few residents on this tiny little island who are fairly isolated, but have kind of found unique ways to be friends with each other, tolerate each other, occasionally quite vehemently hate each other, and are sort of coexisting this weird isolated life, far away from the influence of the outside world. Mm-hmm. Immediately sort of gets roped into kind of the crazy lives and shenanigans of these people. Doesn't get a lot of woodworking done because she spends all of her days kind of trudging around and getting to know people and helping solve problems and spending a lot of time at the local bar drinking and then going home and having very, very strange dreams, fueled by the very potent alcohol that is brewed on this island. Essentially what you get from there is this kind of head-scratching collection of stories of things that have happened to people on this island, things that are currently happening to people on this island, that seem insane or far-fetched or nutty. Really, it would be as if you were at a bar drinking with a friend and he said, no, I have a better story. Let me tell you about this time that this crazy thing happened. And the game sort of shoehorns in all of this stuff in this really kind of unusual, surprising, occasionally quite dark and adult, and occasionally kind of funny in a dark and adult kind of way, sort of experiment in how to tell stories, how to build stories around characters. It's really interesting. And I guess I'm not entirely certain if I thought it was successful. It had a very, not to give anything away, but it had an interesting ending. And I went, oh, okay. I don't know if I would have seen that coming 2.5 hours ago when I first started this. And in the same way that if, a bunch of friends all sort of sat around at a bar telling crazy stories, there wouldn't necessarily be a point. There is a bit of a one-upsmanship maybe that goes into that experience. But it's, it doesn't all sort of come together in a way that's super satisfying. And maybe Welcome to Elk doesn't necessarily do that either. It seems very aware of its, kind of unusual assembly. It tries to kind of create constructs around all of these stories that don't seem to sort of correlate or make sense together, but at the very least are always kind of interesting and sometimes horrifying and sometimes surprising stories. It's just a very, very unusual game. I don't know, that I kind of like, but I'm not sure if I get it.
Is the developer also in Copenhagen or wherever you said this takes place?
Yeah, they are a Danish development house. I don't remember the name.
Okay.
Triple Topper, I think, is the name of the developer. With apologies to them if I got that wrong. Let me look it up.
I'm wondering if your reaction to the ending is just because I feel like in American storytelling we expect certain things that may be different than how they would, for instance, conclude a story in other regions of the world.
The desire for kind of a happy ending or something that sort of ties it all up neatly in a little package.
Sure. I played tons of Japanese games, for instance, where there will be some plot turn or even just the ending where I'll go, oh, I don't know if I like that, but maybe this is more typical in Japanese storytelling fashion. I don't know. Anyway, I'm just curious. Sometimes I feel like seeing the way stories develop, stories from other regions of the world develop, is more interesting than if they had wrapped it up in a way that is more stereotypically American.
Sure. I think that's fair. And that's probably part of what's going on here. There are definitely some things about the way that sort of alcoholism is addressed in the game that feels like a bit of a sort of a cultural dissonance kind of thing where maybe I'm sort of weirdly sensitive to that and don't think it's a thing worth sort of like, not joking about, but like at the very least sort of crafting questionable narratives around. And Welcome to Elk doesn't necessarily seem to sort of like see that as baggage necessarily. And the game goes to a lot of weird kind of dark places, surprisingly dark places when it comes to death that, again, maybe there's just a cultural difference there and sort of how I expect, narratives, video games to sort of handle those things. And, a lot of video games are sort of assembled by committee and sanitized and puritanized and all the rough edges are kind of rubbed off, and Welcome to Elk is not built that way. It is occasionally like I've said a couple of times, quite sort of dark in the way that it handles some of these developments. Yeah. And then your character just sort of goes about her day, just sort of moves forward from there without, sort of internalizing it a little bit and sort of questioning it and asking others about those kinds of things. But it doesn't, I don't know, put the weight on it or the heaviness on it that I think maybe I would expect. If this happened in perhaps an American developed video game, it's part of me thinks it would be maybe a little more saccharine or a little more emotional, and it doesn't feel like Welcome to Elk is built with that kind of mindset or mentality or perspective in mind.
It's kind of cool. Sounds a little different.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It is. Yeah. It is. It's a very cool looking video game. I think, just sort of to get to the nuts and bolts of it, it's everything's in black and white except for the characters, which are these sort of hand drawn. They kind of walk like Muppets almost. You know how the Muppets sort of walk like they're a bag full of arms almost?
Sure. You don't really see them walking, really.
Yeah, well, you see your characters in Welcome to Elk. You see full body characters.
No, I was thinking of the Muppets still.
Yeah, the Muppets kind of bounce.
Yeah.
They have kind of a Kermit, especially if you think of the way that Kermit moves, like his arms kind of flop as he sort of moves across the screen. Your characters in Welcome to Elk do that as well, as they sort of like walk across the screen, like every part of them kind of like bounces like they're puppets or marionettes.
That's good.
Yeah. And they're in color and very sort of like detailed in their assembly, and everything that is sort of interactive, everything that you can sort of like click on. Single button operation here. You're not doing any kind of crazy combat or button combos or anything like that. It is very much a storytelling experience. And you're really just using one button to kind of like interact with things in the environment, interact with other characters, and stuff like that. So it's certainly very unique in its presentation and its sort of assembly and character design. Yeah, it's cool. It's a really unique and unusual perspective and assembly for a video game that just sort of defies expectations in a lot of ways. Comparing it to Night in the Woods, Night in the Woods had a very clear narrative, had a lead character, had, a story it was trying to tell about her life and her interactions with her friends and what those things mean to her in Night in the Woods. And Welcome to Elk doesn't ever sort of feel... And that was, again, maybe a cultural difference. That's an American developer from here in Pennsylvania, in fact. And Welcome to Elk definitely feels a lot more experimental, a lot more of a kind of like a random assembly of interesting bits and pieces. And it doesn't feel as nearly as... sort of structured and narratively driven as something like A Night in the Woods. I can see where the comparison would come from, but it doesn't necessarily feel like it pushes the same buttons to me.
Is there like a purpose to them using these stories like this in the game? Or does it feel like something they decided to do, or does it somehow like make sense with the game's message? Or I'm just trying to imagine.
I don't know if I know the answer to that. They are interesting stories, and the way that it tells them, the sort of the little detours, because sometimes you get sort of characters who tell you stories, and then and I won't spoil anything, but there are other ways that it sort of tells its stories that are interesting or surprising or just step out of the sort of usual narrative of the video game that I was really intrigued by. And I really sort of felt like, oh, this is again not where I thought this was going or what this was going to be. So I don't know if I can answer your question, unfortunately. I've thought a bit about it, and I'm not sure if it has a point other than being kind of an interesting repository for telling these stories.
Well, either way, it's kind of cool. It's an interesting sort of origin point for
absolutely
the narrative.
Yeah, I think its duration, its shortness, it's a couple hours long, maybe 2.5 hours long, is in its service. That, like, it is quirky and weird and experimental, and you quickly sort of get an affinity for these characters, and there's so few of them who live on this island that you sort of know them and their kind of role pretty quickly. Yeah, and it never sort of outstays its welcome. So you get these interesting stories that pop up, this unusual experience that this lead character, this main character, goes through here, as she gets to know these people and hears about their lives and their interactions and what's going on and stuff like that, and then exit, and then you're out, and then game over. So it never sort of, I think, if this was 10 hours long, 15 hours long, it would be like, what is even happening in this video game? But the fact that it's kind of compact and kind of does its thing in an interesting and unique and occasionally quite surprising way is a service to it, is helpful, and that it feels like an experience and an experiment that you can kind of like, oh, cool, that was interesting. I kind of went through that. It was, kind of fun to explore. I'm glad it wasn't 7 hours long.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm being intentionally vague because, like I said, some of these stories and some of these characters and some of the presentation in the game is quite surprising. And I went into it not knowing what any of that was going to be like. And part of the things that I sort of appreciate about this is sort of like, oh, that was interesting. That was surprising. That was, etc. Go with me on this, listeners. If any of this sounds interesting to you, if you have a sense of adventure when it comes to your video game choices and have patience for artsy, experimental kind of indie games that, are fairly brief, but are at the very least are an experiment you could probably appreciate in a video game. I would recommend checking out Welcome to Elk. I liked it, I think.
That's all right.
Yeah.
Better than, like, I think it was bad. How important is it that it's set on this tiny island?
Probably quite important. I think.
All right.
Yeah, that even beyond sort of being a Danish island, being off the coast of Denmark, I think it's helpful that it's sort of self-contained, that it's a small island, that you kind of get quickly like the history of this place, the rich guy who lives on the island, how he became the rich guy, and how everybody sort of has a role. There's the guy who drives the boat that brings the people back and forth from the mainland, but not a lot of people come from the mainland, and there's not a lot of kids that live on this island anymore because everybody grows up and moves away, and there's again, you quickly get these stories and these little nuggets of sort of what life on this island is like fast, because it's a pretty tight-knit community. Everybody, there's one thing to do. It's go to the bar and drink at night. So you go to the bar at the end of your first day on the island and everybody is there. So you walk around the room and you hit the action button and you talk to them and you get stories and you get a little bit about their life and how they have drama with somebody else who lives on the island. And maybe that drama stems more than anything from the fact that it's a quiet place and you're bored and there's not a lot to do. And so you manufacture these things. You manufacture sort of intensity and interest just for lack of options, I think. But yeah, it's interesting. I think sort of having it set as this very close-knit, small community on an isolated island, again, is in service of sort of the structure of this thing and quickly getting up to speed on these characters in this story.
Yeah, well, that's cool. That made me think of that game, Embracelet.
Yes, yeah. It made me think a lot about that game, yeah.
They were in Norway, some very tiny island off the coast of Norway.
Yeah.
But that was, speaking of places where, you don't find a lot of video games set, I thought just that whole setting was extremely cool. So when you're talking about this, I thought, I wonder how, integral this island life is to whatever happens in this game.
Yeah. Yeah, that game popped into my brain quite a bit. And while that game sort of ultimately goes off into fantasy pretty dramatically, I think.
Yeah.
Welcome to Elk is very rooted in reality.
Oh, really? I was thinking, I was 50-50 on whether these stories just got, way embellished into being completely fantastic, or...
Well, okay, maybe I have to defend my perspective then, in that you know, when somebody's telling you a story, particularly if you're in a bar and drinking, that to a certain degree you expect a fair amount of embellishment, right?
Sure,
sure. Yeah. So maybe there's a little bit of an unreliable narrator thing kind of going on here too, is that you really only have their word for it, right?
Okay, but they're all stories that plausibly happen to people.
Yes, yeah, they are believable.
Okay, yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. Which occasionally sort of is what makes them, quite scary or tragic sometimes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah. This is, you don't play this with your kids. I think okay. People know their kids, I think, more than certainly I know their kids, and you know what your kids' interests and their sort of tolerance for occasionally tragic things would be. This looks like a cute game, but it has some quite dark stories to tell. And I like that. I like that sort of duality and that kind of juxtaposition. But it would be tough to play this with a young person, very young person, and have to sort of explain some of this stuff to them, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Noted. I will not play it with any of my kids.
Sure. Don't play this with your Mario Party crowd. DJ.
Okay, good. Yeah. Hey, I brought a cool game over this weekend. Check this one out.
Randy says it has a lot of death in it. Yeah. Again, I don't know if I've gone off the rails or if any of this that I've sort of stitched together sounds intriguing, but this game is called Welcome to Elk, and yeah, I believe I would recommend it.
Oh, that sounds interesting.
Yeah. Definitely, it is that. Yeah, it's a very interesting experiment.
Cool. Speaking of interesting experiments, I played Strangers in Paradise, the Final Fantasy Origin. This game with the guy who says chaos a lot.
Who came to kill chaos.
He's here to kill chaos. That's all he thinks about. Anyway, there's a demo out, and I spent quite a lot of time with it this week, and I think it's actually pretty good. Which really lines up with everything I've heard about this game. I mean, if you don't know what we're talking about, they put out this trailer for this game that is purportedly I forget exactly how they described it, but it's supposed to be like a reimagining of Final Fantasy 1. So same setting and premise, I guess, and events that happen throughout the storyline, except it's developed by Team Ninja, so it's an action game.
Interesting.
Ninja Gaiden. I believe that this team worked on Neo and Neo 2. But they put out this trailer, and it's this guy in a black t-shirt who looks like Eminem, and he goes up to Garland, who is the first boss from Final Fantasy 1, and just starts punching him in the face and talking about how he just says the word chaos a lot. And the trailer was just an instant meme across the entire internet. Everybody's like, oh, I'm here to, chew bubblegum and kill chaos. And I'm all
out of bubblegum. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And everybody, it was everybody's favorite thing to just make fun of for a week.
Yeah. I mean, it was easy to make fun of. It was.
Yeah.
You and I made fun of it on the podcast. I think this was, or maybe I made fun of it on the podcast.
No, you couldn't not make fun of this game.
Okay. But when they rolled its trailer out at E3, I was like, what is this? This has, because it looks like a PlayStation 1990s.
Yes, it looks like a PS3 game.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it looks older than that. But okay. You know these things more than I do, obviously.
Well, I mean, it looks like a game from that era where they're like, oh, everything's in 3D and HD now. What if everything was also just rated M and super gritty for no reason? So we got the Bomberman game and Final Fight, and well, actually that was a PS2 game. Oh, you're right. Okay. But anyway, so just incredibly like over the top edgy and frankly kind of stupid looking. But then as soon as people got their hands on the demo, they were like, oh, it's actually really fun. Because like Team Ninja has a good track record with making fun action games, so that makes sense. It's just very questionable that like these are the characters that they went with, and this is sort of the tone they have selected for this potential Final Fantasy 1 remake.
Mm-hmm.
So I was very curious. I kind of reluctantly started up the demo this week because like I have just the lowest expectations for sort of the writing and the story in this game. Well, actually, here's what happened. I had really no intention of playing this game, and then I heard that they were doing something weird in that the different areas in this game, while they are still tied to whatever happened in Final Fantasy 1, like the plot sounds like it's the same. Like you have to go fight Garland, and then you go to this town that has been sort of overrun by pirates, and like that's all directly from Final Fantasy 1, but for some reason, like you load the pirate cave that level, and it starts talking about like Dimension 14, and then supposedly this version of the pirate cave is inspired or like takes some influence from a similar pirate cave in Final Fantasy 14. And then there are other areas which draw from like other games in the series in different ways, and I just I don't understand this part. Like, what is going on? Are we in the Matrix?
So it tries to be meta.
Yeah, like what is the point?
Are we in the Matrix? Yeah.
And that part is not totally clear from the demo. In fact, I'm wondering if it ever ends up paying off at all, because it's like the way they present it in the demo doesn't feel especially thoroughly thought out.
Oh, that maybe it's just sort of like a random drop for somebody to go, oh, hey, it's like Final Fantasy 14, but like it doesn't pay off potentially.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, like I did the whole pirate cave thing, and it could very easily have just been a generic pirate cave and have no 14 influence on it. There were like, sure, a couple things in common with the 14 dungeon, but I don't think I would have spotted it immediately.
Yeah. I mean, a video game cave is a video game cave. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so if you can get over just the stupid characters, the cast has got to be the worst in the entire series, and the writing, I don't know what's going on. So there's like, it feels like there's this whole faction of Square Enix, and I'm talking about whoever is responsible for the writing in like Final Fantasy 13 and the 7 remake, where it's just not good, guys. It's not good dialogue. People don't voice their lines correctly. Everything is incredibly exaggerated in terms of like how people emote and how the characters act on screen. It's just bad. So same deal with this. Just not good. It just feels like the level of dialogue is something you would find in a text box in the original Final Fantasy, except in this case it's being acted out on screen by these very realistic looking 3D characters, so it's all a bit absurd. But if you could get over it, the combat in this game is so good. It's really frustrating. It's basically I never played Neo, and I have very limited experience with Ninja Gaiden, other Team Ninja games. Yeah. But it feels like a very solid and seemingly deep action game where you start out and you have a couple options for your weapons, and they each have a bunch of different combos you can do. You have special attacks, and you use the special attacks to like break your enemy's guard meters, which makes them more vulnerable and charges up your magic points and lets you do even more amazing attacks. There's just a lot going on in the combat system, which, it takes a little bit to just wrap your head around at the start. But once I got into it, I was just like, it feels even a bit like like a FromSoft game, like a Souls game almost, where it is you doing these attacks and like really watching your enemy's movements, so this attack I have to defend, but maybe the next attack I can parry, because parrying gives me, it'll refill my magic points and give me an advantage in battle. And then you couple that with all these custom sort of combos and skill finishers. There's just a lot going on. And then on top of that, there are all these different jobs you can play, and these range from sort of generic like sword wielder and like pugilist kind of jobs to the classic Final Fantasy stuff. Like eventually I unlocked like red mage, and I could see, like you can see in the skill trees as you unlock different abilities for each job, at the bottom of each tree there will be sort of an advanced like classic Final Fantasy job. And I thought, ooh, what's that going to be like? What's it going to be like playing this game? Instead of instead of using a sword, I'll be like a black mage and just have magic attacks or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So there's so many of them. So it just feels like there's so much variety there.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, I started out playing like the basic job you start out with has this huge great sword, and I honestly wasn't really into it. But as soon as I figured out, I can just switch over to this job that has kind of a short sword and a shield. That one I really got into, and that's when I really, like, the combat system started really clicking for me. And then that just, like, it branches out into, like, Red Mage and a bunch of other jobs. And I could see myself going back and playing through these levels again as a different job, just to see, maybe there's one that I haven't tried yet that's even more fun. Who knows?
Oh, cool. So it's not necessarily built with holding on to that greatsword.
Oh, not at all.
Forever and ever.
Not at all.
It's kind of flexible in the way that you can kind of apply all these different jobs and abilities to it.
Yeah, I feel like, it's in Monster Hunter, where
oh, gotcha.
Everybody has their own favorite weapon.
Sure.
And maybe
what feels good to you.
Yeah, exactly. Like what fits your playstyle.
Gotcha.
But what's also very cool is another Final Fantasy sort of hallmark, is that you can switch jobs in the middle of combat. And so you can have two jobs active at a time, basically, and you just push one of the buttons and you swap between their entire ability sets. And this is something I did not get a huge amount of time to really like dive into, because I was just spending a lot of the time sort of figuring out this one-handed sword job. But it seems like there's just so much potential there, because it's not like you switch to the second job and it is a limited form of that job or anything. It is the whole job. So it seems like you could go from, wielding that two-handed greatsword to just being like a white mage healer class or whatever. And then you can have, like, you have your party members as well, and they all have their jobs. So there's just a lot going on in terms of just like combat variety.
So do you get the vibe, can you get the vibe that maybe that other stuff, so the goofy dialogue and the questionable staging and, the weird graphics and stuff like that, like maybe that's meant to be like a tribute or a riff or some, I don't know, some like, hey, remember when video games looked like this and played like this?
I couldn't tell you what's going on with that. I feel like it seems to me just unlikely that it is intentionally this way.
Deliberate, yeah.
Yeah, or like that they're aware of what's going on. I just
somebody thought this was cool.
You would hope that that's the case, because it really is just ridiculous. But that's just, a lot of just the super cringy stuff is just the main guy, the guy in the t-shirt. The rest of the writing, the other characters are just about as, I don't know, they're not as absurdly edgy as the main guy, but they're also just not real characters. At the very beginning of the game, you all show up in the starting city, and you see the main guy. His name is Jack, and he's holding one of the crystals, which is like all the characters in Final Fantasy 1 had this crystal. And he says something like, I'm here to kill chaos. I don't remember anything else, but that's why I'm here. And then these other two characters pop up, and basically they just go, oh, me too. And then they all do a fist bump, and then they decide to, like, that's the party. Like, that's how you get introduced to the other characters in the game. So I don't know. That maybe is more development than the characters in the original Final Fantasy 1 got. But
sure,
like, is that good? Like, if you're gonna remake a game in 2022, I don't know.
Sure, if you had the opportunity to retell, because it's not a remake of the first Final Fantasy, it's kind of a different vision of it, right?
A reimagining, yeah.
A reimagining, sure. If you had the opportunity to reimagine Final Fantasy 1, would you not be more ambitious than this?
I don't know. Maybe they decided they don't need that. So
maybe this is enough. Maybe ambition is overrated.
Maybe, yeah. In that case, well, maybe that's very astute. Maybe they just said story wasn't the strong point of Final Fantasy 1 anyway, or characterization,
right?
Maybe,
and it still isn't. So
yeah. Just keeping true to that one specific aspect of it.
So that universal truth, right? Exactly.
Somebody pointed out, actually, so all the main party members' character names are 4 letters or less, which was how long a name could be in Final Fantasy 1 on the Nintendo.
Oh, funny.
Which is like, that's really good. I imagine that must have been intentional. But I was like, okay, I'll give you guys a point for that one.
Maybe they just know Final Fantasy fans will buy anything.
That is definitely not true. I mean, well, anyway, so I had, like, combat's super fun once you sort of get a feel for it.
Yeah, it sounds cool.
You have, like, your 2 party members, I believe, just because they wanted you to have party members, because that's, like, a Final Fantasy thing.
Sure.
I found that I had a hard time going through the game, or the first area of the game, with the party members present, though, just because they're just, like, so much better than you at playing the game. So I was, like, kind of fumbling around with this huge sword that I was not very good at wielding. And meanwhile, my 2 party members would just be in there just disassembling any enemy that came up to them. And I got to the boss, and the boss was quite tough. But with my 2 party members there, they did most of the work. And I was like, I would just kind of hang back, because that's what I do in a Monster Hunter game or like a Souls game, and try and get a read on what the boss is doing. Mm-hmm. But meanwhile, like, my party members are just taking him down. And I thought, well, this is not very satisfying.
And you're not controlling them? Are you choosing their party or anything like
you
that?
Can,
their job?
I actually don't know if you can change their job, because I tried to. I thought at one point, maybe I can just make one of them a healer. Or maybe I can make both of them healers, actually, because that's what I need. And they can stand in the back, and I'll just do the fighting. But I don't think you can change their job. I'm not 100% sure on that. So what I ended up doing is I just got rid of them. I went to the party edit screen and said, like, okay, you guys are all in the reserves now. I'm just going to go in by myself and try and do this dungeon. And I have to say, it was so much better just playing it as one character, because you don't have any support. So it's more like a Dark Souls game, where it's like soloing a Monster Hunter game. And you really just have to manage all the enemies on screen at once, which can be challenging. But I thought it was so much more engaging than with my other 2 guys there. And it was super fun to fight the boss. The boss was a bit of an awkward situation, because while it was just so much better, it was just a much better, like, gaming experience fighting the boss one-on-one with my 2 party members there. It is, like, as you would expect, it is much more difficult. So I probably fought this guy for, like, at least half an hour or 45 minutes.
Oh my God.
Because I didn't have my party members there. But I was like, okay, this feels like, this is probably the Dark Souls experience. Typically, I don't think people just one-shot a Dark Souls boss. So it was a bit of a learning process.
I was saying, I want a Dark Souls game where, like, all the bosses have little glowy bits you have to shoot out.
Yeah.
That's my speed. Exactly.
Yeah, just like press here to defeat boss.
Right, exactly.
But anyway, so it turned into a much different game than I was expecting. It was much more like in that Dark Souls vein of things. But I thought it was kind of cool. I'm just a little disappointed that it seemed to be the options were, like, you either have a real difficult time fighting this boss by yourself, or you go in with your party members and they basically steamroll it while you watch.
And you don't have to fight it at all, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know, I'm not sure what to do about that. This just occurred to me. Maybe I just bring one of them along. Maybe
you don't need them both, yeah. Yeah, that's the way to do it.
So yeah, I don't know. But I do like that there are so many different ways that you can kind of tweak your approach to this, whether it's by changing up your equipment or by changing your party configuration and that sort of thing. There are even, like, all these different difficulty modes. There's like a very casual difficulty mode and an advanced one if you're just a Ninja Gaiden pro or whatever. But just had a really good time just going through these dungeons again on all these jobs and trying them out and just thinking like, oh, maybe I would like to play a game where you're just a black mage or a samurai or whatever, in like this sort of revisiting of Final Fantasy.
Right. So do you think you would spring for the full version of this? Is this a $60 purchase for you?
I don't know. I really hope that the story goes somewhere, but it is just kind of embarrassing to see just like Jack and his antics. It wasn't like, I don't know if I'd say it was terrible, because it was just, it's almost like, so bad it's good. But I don't know. I did really enjoy the combat, though. It was very good. The weirdest thing about this, and maybe the thing that is keeping me from making a decision on it, is that, so I was playing this on PS4. It doesn't look great on PS4, and I usually don't get hung up about the graphics or anything, but the way they have done it, I assume they changed the game to get it to run on PS4, because this is like a next-gen targeted game, is that it runs at a very low resolution, which, it's been a long time since I've seen a game do this. It reminds me of like trying to play a Battlefield game on my very ill-equipped PC back in like 2005. And I would just have to turn the resolution all the way down in order for it to run at an acceptable frame rate.
Yeah.
So it looks very blurry, which is weird.
And that's not a setting you turned on. That's just how that's the compromise.
No, it's just like that. And I've heard things like, I've heard the PS5 version doesn't look great either. I can't totally confirm that. I think the PS5 version has a couple of options. Like, a lot of games will have this. You can have either a performance mode or you can have a graphics mode. And the graphics mode is very slow, but it looks better. Like, it has all the effects and everything. And the performance mode is very smooth, but maybe it's very blurry like this PS4
maybe it looks like Stranger of Paradise. Yeah.
So it was a little jarring getting into it. I don't think I care that much, because it was still fun to play. Like, the combat was still very good. It is just weird because some of the cutscenes are obviously like pre-rendered, so they would have the full resolution and like all the effects and everything, and then it would immediately switch back to looking like, oh, why is the whole screen smeared with Vaseline or whatever?
I need to clean my glasses.
Yeah. So just very strange. So in my case, I don't think it's a deal breaker, but I'm kind of wondering like, oh, maybe I assume at some point I'll get a PS5. Maybe I'll just play it then.
Yeah.
But anyway, so no, until then, the good news is this demo, like, your progress carries over to the full game. So whenever I decide to make the leap, I'll just be able to carry my red mage and all my jobs over, presumably.
A lot of weird choices. It seems like a lot of, like, I don't know, very dubious decisions went into the assembly of this game.
Really weird. I am just really curious to see what they end up doing with the plot. Like, why is it important that each of these areas draws from another Final Fantasy game? Like, what is going on? There was, like, so at some point in the long-running plot of Final Fantasy XIV, it seemed like they were sort of hinting that all the Final Fantasy game worlds were connected in a way. Because that's always been kind of a distinction about the Final Fantasy games. Like, each one is completely separate from the other ones, even though they have some things in common, right? And that isn't actually how...
Are you asking me if that's right?
No, I'm just letting you know.
Okay, gotcha.
And that's not actually what ended up happening in 14. But it feels like in this, I hope that's not what they're building towards. They're just like, oh, look, and this is how these games tie together, and these characters come from this world. And it's just like, oh,
sure.
I really don't like when games or just like long-running series try and do that.
Yeah. It was like what was the Persona Q? In Persona Q2, is they took all the protagonists, like every character from Persona 3, 4, and 5, and put them all together in one video game. I'm like, it's too much, guys. Too much. And I don't need it. Yeah.
Oh, so I was thinking, if you want to put all the characters together in one game just for the sake of having them all together, like, that's great. But then don't tell me that, like, oh, we're able to do this because there's a special, like, warp zone in the middle of every world that they can all go to. I'm just like, no, that's too much. Like, that's like something George Lucas would come up with.
We need a sci-fi solution for a sci-fi problem,
yes,
guys.
Let's just explain how every minute detail of this game works.
Sure. Let's sci-fi the hell out of this.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
So, I don't know. I'm not sure where else to go with this game.
You've said all that needs to be said.
Yeah. It's just, the story is absurd. It's pretty much exactly what I expected. But the gameplay, pleasant surprise. So I could feasibly see myself playing this at some point.
Well, cool. I mean, I guess that is a surprising revelation. I mean, based on that first trailer specifically, there's no part of me that thought any of this would be entertaining. But
yeah,
I'm not the target audience, obviously. So
yeah, no. Based on the same with me. Based on the first trailer, I just thought, well, so this is way worse than I expected. How could they possibly do something this bad? But at least the game part of it's good.
Yeah, and that's the part you want to be good, right?
Right. I do. I mean, it is just real goofy going back to Final Fantasy 1, first of all, because that game felt like, especially compared to the later games in the series, it's so slight. But it's just such a weird way to dig it back up.
Yeah. Can you briefly explain what does the title mean? Is Stranger of Paradise some relevant thing to the Final Fantasy universe?
In a Paradise, the Final Fantasy Chronicles. So it seems like this guy, Jack Garland. Oh, I don't know if I said his last name. I'll come back to that. It seems like maybe he's not from Final Fantasy 1 world or whatever. Maybe he's from somewhere else. Maybe he is dimension hopping through all these Final Fantasy games. That seems to be the popular theory. So he is the stranger in paradise or whatever.
Gotcha. Okay. Oh man. So if they do origin stories on every past Final Fantasy game, Jack will be
he's going to be there for every single one.
Eminem will be your main character in all of them.
Oh, terrible.
Yeah. Lucky you.
Yeah. I don't know if this is too much detail to get into. And
probably.
It's been a while since I played Final Fantasy 1, so I'm a little hazy and everything.
Yeah.
But the thing about Final Fantasy 1, full spoilers if you've not played Final Fantasy 1, but you go to the first dungeon in that game and you fight the boss whose name is Garland, and then you go play the whole rest of the game. You end up doing this time warp thing back thousands of years before the game started, and you fight this primal incarnation of like evil or something who's called Chaos. And it turns out that was somehow Garland, the first boss you fought, who got sent back in time until he turned into this horrible thing. And so the guy in this, his name is Jack Garland. So that's the guy. He's the guy in the castle who they run into at the start of the game. And then he becomes Chaos later on. But the whole time he's like, I'm here to kill Garland and then I'm going to kill Chaos. And I'm just are we supposed to know all this at this point? I'm not really sure what's going on because they've been very open. They told everybody this was the guy's name. So that's probably the biggest mystery at this point. Just what is the deal? Why doesn't he know what's going on?
They don't hide that for some revelation halfway through the game.
Oh, I'm sure they will try and present it that way. But the thing is that everybody already knows what's going on. So I don't know. Maybe that's the reason to play this game, just to see how that scene plays out. Just how much they try and ham it up for the big reveal that everybody's known about for 30 years.
I am Jack's complete lack of surprise.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Sounds like a mess, but maybe a fun mess.
It's a disaster. Just on the story side of things, it is a complete disaster. But maybe a disaster that I want to play.
Right. Yeah. Well, cool. All right. Well, maybe we should wrap this thing up and you can go play it again.
I still have some job to check out, so maybe I will.
All right. If you need any more video game hangover in your brain, you should follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/VGHangover. And you can always get show notes and links and tell us what you thought about this episode at VGHangover.com. We would love for you to join us on Discord. You can hang out, chat about video games and other fun pop culture stuff. You can get a link to that at VGHangover.com as well. And please subscribe, rate, and review us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and anywhere else you can get a podcast. And help us out by telling your friends about the show, please.
Yes, that really helps us get the word out. We appreciate it a lot.
Yeah.
We want to give thanks again to Protodome for our intro and outro music this week. Check out more of his work. Just go over to protodome.bandcamp.com. Maybe buy an album or two.
Nice. We'll be back next week. Until then, this is Randy Dickinson.
Did I mention that there's just a Frank Sinatra song in this game for no reason?
No? That's a weird licensing pivot.
I'm just remembering all this like completely random stuff that happens. But anyway, I'm DJ Ross. Thanks for listening.
Have a good night. Have a good day. Have a good drive. Have a good workout. Whatever you're doing right now, have a good one of those.
Whatever you're doing, make it good.
Yep.
Good night.
Bye. Bye.